Okay, so the reason we explained the difference between family and project parameters is because I want you to have a full, complete understanding of what they are and how they work when we start to generate our window and door schedules. So we're going to start with the door schedules. I think because it has the most diversity and it's going to challenge you probably more than your other stuff. So let's go to View and Schedules and just go to Schedule Quantities. The list down here has all the different categories that you can schedule. So go ahead and check doors and hit OK. Did I introduce schedules to you guys at all yet?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's right. We talked about it as about sheet indexes, right?
You showed us how to sort through them a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I'll probably just kind of breeze through some of the general stuff. But you know that you have families and you have types, right? The family is, this is a single flush door. The type is, this is a 3 foot by 7 foot versus this is a 3 foot by 6 foot 8. So you could load the family and type, you could load the family, or you could just load the type. So I'm going to load the type. I'm going to load type mark. Let's load let's see, type and type mark. Yeah, let's just leave it like that. Okay, and we'll do, am I crazy or is there it is. Head height, and we're going to do width, and we'll just leave it at that for now. Okay, head height and width. So we have our type, we have our type mark, and we have our head height, and we have our width. So when you're working with this, the parameters that are preloaded are, in this case, all type parameters, or at least they should be. But not everything is going to be a type parameter. For instance, if you need to add in something like the finish, which I hope this finish is not a type parameter finish. Good, it's not. You can actually go in and type what you want the finish to be. So if it's wood, you can type in WD, right? So you can use that to sort of fill in some elements, even if it's the same type. It might be a different finish, right? So that's what you call an instance parameter. So this one might be wood, this one might be steel. I'm not sure yet, but anyway, that's what you have to do with that. Let's see, we have, let me figure out which parameters we want real quick. All right, so what I want to point out real quick is the difference between the type mark and the mark. So I'm going to insert the field for mark. And I'm going to move it up to be next to type mark. All right. So one thing you notice that's a little bit different is the type mark shows numbers that are all basically associated with the type, the door type. But the mark does not. The mark is calculating it basically by what door number it is in the project. So the difference is this is a type parameter, that's an instance parameter. And some projects are going to itemize doors a little differently. For this project, we're going to do it, generally speaking, by just the type mark. Okay, so let's see. All right, so when it comes to other parameters, I want to add in, like we have the finish, and the finish generally is talking about the finish of the door. So that means, see how that door right there is wood? It's a wood finish. The frame of that door is actually steel. So we need to create that parameter. All right, but we want to be able to define the frame material, right, for all of our doors. So which type of parameter are we going to use? Family parameter or project parameter? Family parameter?
Yeah, that's my vote.
Anybody else? Yeah. Well, the truth is it doesn't really matter. Well, it kind of does. Let's take a look at it and see what happens.
Doesn't matter, or it kind of matter? like what's the answer?
Well, it does matter.
Okay. It does matter.
Yeah, it certainly does matter, but it kind of doesn't matter, but it mostly does matter. I'll show you what I mean. So let's edit the family type. And let's go to your parameters. And we need to create a frame material. So let's go to new, not new type, sorry, down here. New parameter, family parameter. We're going to say frame material. And we're going to go to text. And we're going to group this under materials and finishes and hit OK. So now it shows up here. We hit OK. And we load that thing in. Overwrite. And then we go to our schedule and we say, all right, now I want to add that parameter. So I go to fields and I look for frame material and I load it in. Did that already have frame material before I loaded it in?
Yeah.
It was already there? Does yours already have it? All right, that's a bad example. Let's call it, let me grab that door again. Let's go with family parameter. Let's go with hardware section. Okay, so hardware section is something that is not out of the box on a door. So we're going to go to text. We're going to put it under, let's put it under identity data, and then hit OK. That should show up down here, or where's it? Oh, I have it collapsed. Hardware section, good. Hit OK, and then load that thing in. Overwrite. Okay, so we're going to go to fields. Oh, sorry, fields, and now we're going to look for hardware section, and it's not there. Okay, so yeah, so let me just kind of describe that as yes, it does matter, but it also doesn't matter because you can manage that with shared parameters in a way. Eventually, what you have to do is if you're utilizing shared parameters, you create a file that whenever you create a new door, you just load in all of your default parameters, okay? Just like we did, right? And we just do it through a shared parameter file. Then, whenever we have, we would do it in our template where we would reload those shared parameters into our template, and then they would become parameters here as well. So the family doesn't pass through the parameter if it's a family parameter. So what you have to do is basically insert that parameter on its behalf. So I wonder if it has to actually be through a shared parameter. Let's go to manage, and let's go to, I'm going to try doing it just as a project parameter. I've never done it this way, but I'm just going to give it a shot. So let's go to text. It's going to be on doors. And I called it hardware section, right? Under identity data. I actually don't think this will work, but I'm trying it. Boom. Fields. Hardware section. Add it. Boom. So now, let me go back to a door and sort of preload it. Oh, I could just do it through here. All right, so grab this door, go to edit type. Let's see if it duplicated it under identity data. It did not. So if I say hardware section 10 or let's go with 9:10:01. I don't know what section it actually is. Hit OK. Go back to our schedule. And it didn't populate. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think that would work because they're separate parameters. So I guess it does matter. I've never done it that way. I thought you could pass through the shared parameter, but anyway. So I guess let's go back here. So what we have to do is create it as the project parameter. Let's get rid of that. I'm going to delete that guy. Okay, so now let's go to manage project parameters, add. We're going to call this one hardware section. Wait, yeah. I don't know why I deleted it, but you get the idea. I shouldn't have deleted it because that was a project parameter. Okay, what questions do you have? I probably just thoroughly confused you because I was wrong. But anyway, so let me summarize. The project, or let's start with the family parameter, right? The family parameter is something that you can use to manage an element of that family that doesn't pass through into the schedules, okay? If you're going to modify a family parameter and you want it to pass through to the schedules, you have to use what's called a shared parameter. The shared parameter, do you guys want me to just show you how to do a shared parameter? Should I just do that? Okay, let's do the alternate right here in this video then. So here's the family that we want to edit. If we're going to do a shared parameter, we're going to go to Manage, Shared Parameters. Okay, this is a new window. We actually will create a shared parameter file, and I'm going to put that in our class folder. Resources, charade parameters. All right, and then we have these things called parameter groups, and we have parameters. So the interesting thing is it doesn't just pre-populate the parameter groups by category, which for many small offices and applications it makes sense. So I'm going to emulate that and just call this doors. And then go to new parameter. So the new parameter you just name and kind of set up like what it refers to. So I'm going to call this hardware section. Whoops, sorry, delete that one if you did it the same way I did. Hardware section, and the discipline doesn't really matter, leave it as common. The type of parameter is text. I think that did go through as text last time. And if you want to create a tooltip, you can. So I'm going to edit this tooltip, and I'm going to say master spec section let's call it table index, right? And I'm just kind of throwing some text in there, right? So that you know when it shows up what it looks like. So that's hardware section. I hit OK. When I go into the family here, I have I don't have my hardware section. I think this is the old one. Let me get rid of that. All right, so I don't have that hardware section in here. We need to load that into the family. So that just modified the shared parameter file. So I'm going to go to New. I'm going to click on Shared Parameter. I'll select a shared parameter, and I'll select that one that I just made. Say OK, OK. Boom, hardware section is right there. I can say 090010. I'll call it A. I don't know. OK. Now, that parameter exists in the family. I load it back into the project. If I edit the type of the door, you'll see that it exists right here. Okay. If I try to go to the schedule and I go to fields, there's hardware section. I think this is the old one. Oh, that did pass it right through. I thought you had to reload it in here too. That's news to me. All right. It's clearly been a while since I set one of these up. So don't quote me on this. This is a new behavior to me that I'm realizing, but I guess if it's a shared parameter, it does pass through automatically. I thought you had to reload it in the project, but I guess not, which is good. All right, so what questions do you have about that? Yeah?
Maybe you could re-explain the difference between a shared parameter and a project parameter, and perhaps a global global parameter, but instead of doing it by telling us, could you maybe like draw like a flow chart or something?
Sure. Yeah. Hang on.
And just keep like, just to very simply illustrate the
All right, guys. So I'm going to summarize everything here with this little note thing I just made, this matrix, so to speak.
expand the text a little bit, please.
Like make it bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
For the font size.
There you go. Okay, so let's sum this up. So you have your project and you have families, okay? And within your project or families, you may have a set of parameters, okay? You have shared parameters, project parameters, and you have family parameters. Think of shared parameters as something that becomes project parameters and family parameters. Where's my thing here? Not that. Let's do left border. How do you do a thick left border? There you go. There you go. So think of shared parameters as something that becomes project parameters and family parameters. Does that make sense? All right. So now let's talk about the shared parameters. When you create a shared parameter, you load it into a family, right? And it will load as either an instance or type parameter for that family. That parameter will pass through into the project, and you can schedule it if it's a schedulable field when it's loaded into a project. For a project, when you load a shared parameter into a project, it loads a default parameter. And so that's something that is typically set up by like an office, for instance. So like if your office utilizes like BOMA square footage calculations, you might have parameters specific to BOMA categories, right? Like BOMA departments or something like that. So because BOMA is broken down into specific departments like building service and rentable areas, that kind of stuff. So that might be an example of like a shared parameter that gets loaded directly into the project but doesn't need to be associated to a family. Does that part make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. And a shared parameter that does get loaded into a family would be the types of shared parameters that you use for like a door schedule. For instance, if you have a hardware section that doesn't show up in Revit out of the box. So those are shared parameters that all live in the same shared parameter file that you either load into a project or a family. All right, so then moving on to the other parameters, project parameters don't really have any application to families at all. Okay, if you load a project parameter into your project or create one, load or create, and you try to open up your family and edit that in the family, you won't be able to. So basically, a project parameter is either going to be loaded for a single category or a number of categories. So a single category means like for doors, if I want to add a like a kick plate material, right? Because the door like that has a kick plate at the bottom and it's steel. Some of them are plastic, right? You might add that for doors only. But if I want to add a hardware section, but it also applies to windows, I can add that project parameter to both categories at once. Okay, but I do that on the project side. If I could do that on the project side, if I wanted to, if it's a small enough project. But family parameters, if you're doing it in the family side, that's for use for family and type. So that same thing for hardware, you could just use a shared parameter and load it to all of your families if you want, or you could manually go in and do it to each one. It's not advisable to do it that way. And then family parameters are and the important part to know about family parameters that are then passed into a project here is that they're visible in the project only when you go to edit the family. It won't be visible in schedules or editable in schedules. Does that make sense? And I'll save this file on the drive, guys. So anyway, are there questions about that?
Yeah, so the family parameter, as you said, so you can only see that in the family editor?
No. You can see it in the family editor, but you can only see it when you edit the family type. So that's like if I go in here and I go to edit type, those are all that you'll see every parameter that's associated with this family in this list, no matter if it was a project parameter or if it was a family parameter. It doesn't have a distinction between the two in this menu. Does that make sense? Well, yeah, I get that you guys are going to be confused about this for a while. You can, once you mess around with it a little bit, you can jump back into this video or this file and try to understand it a little better. But it's one of those things that like you could understand it in theory, and then when you go to do it, you're not going to do it right, or it's going to take you a while to figure out. Yeah.
Basically, in summary, if you want to edit, well, yeah, if you want to edit anything, you just go to that same window that you have open right there.
No.
Just so you know.
Well, yes.
Because it has, you said it has both, or it has all the parameters.
If you want to edit any of the existing parameters, yes, you go here. You can edit them there. But you know, I could also edit some parameters right in the schedule, right? Like if I go to my door schedule and I want to change my hardware section, I could do it right here because it's a shared parameter that passed through to my project and it's schedulable and I can change it. But if I have like the manufacturer's website field or something like that, and it's an unschedulable field because it was a family parameter, I won't be able to see that here. I won't be able to, like if I go to fields, it's not going to show up. Like the website thing won't even show up here. Does that make sense? I'd have to go to my door and I'd have to go to edit and it would show up here. Something down here. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So let's say, for example, in your office, when you guys are going to start a new project, you have already like a template that's set up with all your shared parameters, or is that like in a folder and then everybody has access to that folder and just access those?
Yeah, good question. So once you have like a really good template, the shared parameter file doesn't get as much use. It is still necessary in case you like inherit a project and you need to add it in, or if you need to add it into a consultant's project file. Yeah, in theory, like all the fields that you need should really be set up in your template, and you really only keep the shared parameters file for when you have to do something custom. You know, you kind of, well, I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive because a shared parameters file is very standardized, but not, I wouldn't say custom. How do I want to describe it?
It's more specific.
Yeah, it's like when you want to adapt those standards to a non-standardized project, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the project parameters are just instance-based for the most part.
Be careful with the word instance. You can do an instance is one instance of a family. So you can, even if it's a project parameter, you can create it as a type or instance parameter. But I think what you meant by instance is like you're just doing it as a one-off addition to the project, right?
Meaning you could load it into your project as project parameter, but wherever that's necessary, you can click on that and then manipulate that value.
Right.
Where necessary, or add that value where necessary. Like for example with the kick plates, not all the doors in your house have a kick plate, but where they do, you can go there and apply that parameter to that area.
Yes, that is an instance parameter, but you like a project parameter does type parameters as well. Like if you needed a door with a vision window and a door without, then that's a type parameter, something like that. You know, you'd have a different family for that usually, but is that making sense to you guys? Maybe I'll draw like a little thing. Hang on. I'm going to stop this video though because it's getting way too long.